All right, get ready, because this deep dive, well, it takes us right to the heart of a question that's been around forever. Why do people cheat? And you've given us a gold mine here, a Reddit thread
Yeah.
from that rating advice. Talk about real and raw, right? Straight from the people who've lived through infidelity.
What I find so interesting about this particular source is it's not just, the partners who were cheated on sharing their hurt, We actually get to hear from the cheaters themselves, trying to explain, like, what on earth they were thinking. It's like a mix of justifications and emotions, and it makes you wonder if there even is one answer to this question, the question of why people cheat.
Right. Like, is there even one answer? And it's funny because the thread starts with someone saying basically that, just.
Yeah.
Why? Just like that, after being cheated on. Like, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the amazing thing is just how many different responses it gets.
It's like someone opened up this Pandora's box of relationship problems. And as we go through this thread, we start to see some themes, like
Yeah.
groups of explanations that kind of start to make sense of it all.
One of the first things that jumps out is that debate. Is cheating? Is it just biology? You see a lot of posters, especially guys, saying it's just hardwired, especially for men, talking about this, like primal urge for multiple partners.
Yeah, it's that classic evolutionary psychology argument
Yeah.
that men are kind of programmed to spread their genes. But, and this is important, hold on, before we all start thinking we're just robots controlled by our biology,
Yeah.
there are a ton of people pushing back against that idea.
Oh, yeah. It's like a battle of the sexes right there in the comments.
Yeah.
You've got people, men and women, saying biology is not destiny. It's about making choices, self-control, and honoring your promises,
Yeah.
regardless of what your biology might be telling you.
And this is where it gets really interesting. We can't say that biology has no influence, right? But we also have the ability to think, to make conscious decisions. It's that push and pull between nature and nurture, between just doing what you feel like and actually thinking about your choices. That's what this thread really brings to life.
Makes you think, maybe understanding that tension is the key to building stronger relationships. If we know about our biological drives, we can actually, be more careful about setting boundaries and making choices that actually reflect what we believe in.
Absolutely. It's about taking responsibility for what we do, instead of just saying, oh, my biology made me do it. And that brings us to another big theme from this Reddit thread. Unmet needs. It's like everyone's talking about feeling neglected, lonely, and just not getting what they need from their relationships.
Yeah, this is where we get into the nitty-gritty of emotional and physical needs. People are sharing really personal stuff about feeling disconnected emotionally, not satisfied sexually, or just like they're not getting that validation they crave from their partners.
And this is where attachment theory comes in. The idea that how we were treated as kids affects how we connect with people as adults. So people who didn't get enough attention or consistent care when they were young might end up looking for that validation and security somewhere else, even if it means crossing lines.
Okay, so this is getting pretty deep. We're talking biology, psychology, and now even childhood stuff affecting adult relationships. And speaking of deep-seated issues, there's a whole bunch of comments about cheating being tied to insecurity and needing that validation from other people.
Yeah, think about it. We all want to feel attractive, desirable, worthy of love, right? But for some people, that need becomes so strong that they need constant reassurance from outside sources. And that's where cheating can be so dangerous. It gives you a little ego boost for a minute, but in the end, it just leaves you feeling emptier.
It's like they're trying to fill a hole inside themselves by getting attention from others. And there are some really sad stories in here that show that, like this woman who talks about feeling invisible in her marriage. And she turns to an affair to feel seen and wanted again.
Yeah, her story really shows how emotional neglect can set the stage for infidelity. It's not always about finding someone better. Sometimes it's just about wanting that basic human need, to feel valued and appreciated by someone.
Makes you wonder, are we paying enough attention to our partner's emotional needs? Are we really seeing them, acknowledging how they feel, and making them feel loved and cherished?
It's a question everyone in a relationship should think about. Because ignoring those emotional needs can create cracks in your partnership. And those cracks, well, they can make it easier to fall into infidelity.
That's like a recipe for disaster, isn't it? Unmet needs, insecurity, and then suddenly opportunity comes knocking. Literally knocking. Because some people in here talk about cheating being just that. Opportunistic, they weren't thinking ahead, or they were just weak when they were tempted.
That's where impulsivity comes in, making decisions in the heat of the moment without thinking about the consequences. Someone in the thread said it perfectly, like, a moment of bad judgment can lead to a lifetime of regret.
Like that saying, one moment of pleasure, a lifetime of pain.
Hmm.
And this thread is full of stories like that.
Oh, absolutely. Like this guy who cheated after his, what do they call it, his glow up. He lost weight, got all this attention, and felt like he could have anyone he wanted. Admitted it went to his head, led him to do things he totally regrets now.
Wow. It's like a reminder that even people who seem confident and secure can fall into temptation,
Hmm.
especially when all that validation is coming at them. It shows how powerful attention can be and how important it is to stick to your values, even when you're feeling on top of the world.
It's like that old story of Icarus. Flew too close to the sun, and, well, you know what happened. Sometimes too much attention, too much validation can be blinding. It can make us do things we wouldn't normally do.
But this thread isn't just about individual screw-ups. It also shows how unhealthy relationships can actually make cheating more likely.
Mm.
You see people talking about resentment building up, communication breaking down,
Mm.
feeling trapped in a relationship that isn't working anymore.
It's like the relationship itself becomes the problem. A pressure cooker of unmet needs, arguments that never get resolved, and all this unspoken resentment. And in that environment, well, cheating can become just a symptom of something much bigger.
It's like cheating becomes the breaking point, the final straw that forces you to deal with all the stuff that's been simmering under the surface.
Exactly. And it reminds us that infidelity isn't always black and white. Sometimes it's a cry for help, a desperate attempt to change things or escape a situation that feels impossible.
And while we're talking about those deeper issues, we can't ignore, the big one, trauma. Quite a few people in this thread are brave enough to share how past trauma or abuse has affected their relationships and even played a part in cheating, either their own or their partners.
It adds another layer to the whole thing, doesn't it? Like, it reminds you that cheating isn't always about pleasure or excitement. Sometimes it's about dealing with really deep pain.
You see that in this one story, this woman who cheated while she was in an abusive relationship, she says it was a way to feel in control again, to feel desired, worthy, even if it was just for a little while.
Her experience shows how trauma can mess with your ability to trust, to form healthy attachments, to set boundaries. So, in that context, infidelity becomes less about the other person and more about trying to deal with the aftermath of abuse and seeking validation in ways that aren't healthy.
It's heartbreaking, really.
Mm.
Reminds us that there's often a lot more going on than we realize. And this thread really makes you want to approach these situations with empathy, understanding that everyone's carrying their own baggage.
Speaking of different perspectives, we can't forget about the people who actually admit to cheating in this thread. It's a whole mix of emotions. You've got regret, attempts to explain it away, and then some who are just cynical about the whole thing.
Yeah, reading their confessions is a wild ride. You have those who seem truly sorry. They acknowledge the pain they caused and are trying to figure out why they did it. And then there are others who just seem like they don't care, making excuses instead of taking responsibility.
It's tough hearing from the people who cause this kind of hurt. But it's important if we want to really understand infidelity. Remember, we're looking for the nuances here, not just good guys and bad guys.
Right, exactly. One post that really stuck with me was this guy who admits to cheating after feeling neglected for years in his relationship. He was lonely, wanted attention, and eventually he went looking for it somewhere else, even though he knew it was wrong.
His story goes back to that basic human need for connection we talked about. It shows how ignoring those emotional needs, even if you don't mean to, can really damage a relationship and make it more likely that someone will stray.
And then there's this woman who cheated on her husband. After like almost 13 years of marriage, she felt isolated, unappreciated, like she was losing herself in the relationship. She tried to talk to him to work on things, but she felt like he wasn't listening. And in the end, she made that decision to look for validation elsewhere.
Wow. Her story raises so many questions about long-term relationships. How do you keep that intimacy alive over time? How do you deal with the challenges and changes that life throws at you? And maybe most importantly, how do you communicate what you need and create a space where you can both be vulnerable and grow together?
It's a lot to think about, for sure. And looking at all these different stories, it's clear there's no one type of person who cheats.
Right, it's not just men or certain age group or personality. Anyone can cheat for reasons that are complicated and personal.
Yeah. It's a good reminder that even people who seem to have it all together can struggle with temptation, make bad choices, and hurt the people they love.
It's humbling, really, and while we should never say cheating is okay, it's important to go beyond those simple judgments and try to see the human stories behind these actions.
It's about understanding why, not just what happened. Because in this thread, there's this constant debate going on. Is cheating always a sign of a bad person? Or can it be influenced by the situation?
It's like a philosophy discussion playing out in the comments, reflecting the bigger conversation we have in society about infidelity. On one hand, there's that strong moral judgment, that feeling of betrayal and broken trust. But then there's also this growing understanding that relationships are complex, that people bring their own baggage and weaknesses to the table, and that sometimes cheating is a sign of a deeper problem in the relationship itself.
It's about recognizing that we're all human. We all make mistakes. We can hurt the people we love, even when we don't want to.
And this leads to another important idea that comes up a lot in this thread: self-awareness. You see people struggling with their own motivations, their weaknesses, the fact that they're capable of both loving someone and betraying them. It's like they're looking in the mirror and asking themselves the tough questions. What do I need? What are my triggers? What boundaries do I need to set to protect myself and my relationship?
It's about understanding your own patterns
Yeah,
and recognizing the situations that might make you more likely to make bad choices.
exactly. And it's also about being honest with yourself about what you want and need from a relationship. If you're not getting those needs met, you need to talk to your partner. Don't go looking for it somewhere else.
It's about taking control of your own happiness and well-being, not expecting your partner to fix everything for you.
That's a powerful message, right? It's about creating relationships built on respect, open communication, and a genuine desire to help each other grow.
And speaking of growth, it's good to remember that self-awareness is a journey, not a destination. We're always changing, learning from what happens to us, and hopefully becoming more in tune with what we need and what the people we love need.
It's about being open to feedback from your partner, from friends you trust, or mentors. It means admitting when you've messed up and being willing to make things right.
So this deep dive isn't just about dissecting why people cheat. It's also about finding ways to build stronger, more resilient relationships.
Exactly. And one of the things that keeps coming up in this thread is how important communication is. And I don't just mean talking, I mean really listening to your partner, trying to see things from their point of view, and expressing what you need in a way that's clear and respectful.
A lot of people talk about creating that safe space for vulnerability in a relationship, where you feel like you can share your fears, your insecurities, what you want, without being judged or shut down.
It's about building that emotional intimacy, where both of you feel seen, heard, and valued for who you really are.
And that ties into another big point that people keep mentioning. You need to address problems when they come up. Don't just let them simmer and turn into resentment.
It's about having those difficult conversations, facing the problems head on, and working together to find solutions that work for both of you.
Sounds like being proactive is key. Don't wait for things to blow up before you deal with them.
Yeah, exactly. It's like taking care of a garden, If you just let the weeds grow, they'll take over the whole thing. But if you pull them out early, you can have a beautiful garden.
So taking all this in, what are some of the big takeaways from this deep dive into, well, Reddit's relationship advice?
I think the biggest one is that infidelity is complicated. There are so many things that can contribute to it. There's no easy answer. It's about people, trying to figure out their needs, their desires, their weaknesses, and just dealing with how messy relationships can be.
Yeah. It's about recognizing that it's not always black and white, that good people can make bad decisions.
Right. And it's about understanding that while biology might be a factor, we still have the power to choose how we act, how we treat other people.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I've got one last question for you. Thinking about all these different perspectives on cheating, how might understanding these motivations change the way you approach relationships and how you communicate with your partner? Does it change how you see things?
That's a really good question. It makes you think about your own beliefs, your own experiences, and how you navigate this whole complicated world of love and relationships.
That's a wrap on this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us. And as always, keep those brains buzzing.